Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Loft. And it's a pleasure for the Loft and the Hungry Mind to present this evening of poetry, the poetry of John Engman, and to celebrate the publication of his book, Temporary Help. As many of you know, John Engman died suddenly in 1996 at the age of 47. He was the recipient of a Loft McKnight Award of Distinction in Poetry that year and had completed the manuscript that would become the book that we'll be reading from tonight. He had also written a chapbook called Alcatraz and another full-length collection, Keeping Still Mountain. And he'd received numerous recognitions for his work, including a Bush Fellowship and a Minnesota State Arts Board grant. He was known as an excellent teacher, a wonderful poet, and among many of you in this room as a good friend. We are very grateful to Robert and Evelyn Engman for allowing the remainder of John's fellowship to support emerging poets who could not otherwise study at the Loft, to Jim Perlman from Holy Cow Press for publishing this work, and to John Mitchell for his loyalty to John's poetry and the work he has done to get it out into the world in so many different ways.
A few years ago, I made a videotape as just kind of a project to learn to use video, and three of the participants in that film, the writers who were part of it, are here tonight. And I asked John to be in the video, and of course he agreed, but when it came time to make the arrangements, of course, he said no. And I had to beg, plead, threaten to get him to do this. He reads from what appear to be notes, but I think it's all improvised. At least we never found any evidence of his performance here, which was impromptu. And I think you need to hear the poet's voice, you need to hear John's voice, and once you hear him, you will understand how to read his poems.
Hello, my name is John Engman, and I'm a poet. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking that watching people reading poetry on video is probably not the most interesting thing in the world. I also know that most of you don't read poetry, that most of you don't think poetry is important. I also know that those of you who do read poetry and do think poetry is important probably don't read my poetry and don't think my poetry is important. Well, there's something I'd like to share with you. Do you think you could zoom in on this a little bit? You see up here what it says. Can you read that? United States Senate. And there's my name, John Engman. Dear John, thanks for sending the poems. All of us here in the United States Senate really enjoyed reading them. You have a strong imagination and keen insight. Please send more. Sincerely, your United States Senator. Another letter. Dear John, your poems have brought me many hours of reading enjoyment. You made me laugh. You made me cry. You have an excellent ear for the language, and I should know. I didn't get to be a famous film star for nothing. Sincerely, Mr. Dustin Hoffman, Academy Award winner. Here's a little older one. Dear Mr. Engman, Buddy is good, Elvis is terrific, but when we really need inspiration, you're the one we turn to. Keep up the good work. Sincerely, and I wonder if you could zoom in on this a little bit. I don't know if you can read that. John, Paul, George, and Ringo. This one's kind of special to me, and I think you can understand why. Now, I'm not telling you this because I have a big head or anything like that, but I just wanted to let you know that there are people in this world, and people who are a lot more important than you are, who do read my work, who do think it's important, and have some pretty high praise for it. Would you like to hear something? The building I live in is tipping over. The archaeologist who digs deep enough through the strata of ruined chances and long verandas of smashed hope will find my bones just as I left them, in rows like a xylophone. She may play my ribs with her rubber mallet, reviving a mood from ages ago, the haunted little tunes of my carbon-14 content. This is what she will know. I was a Homo sapiens with few employable traits, not much data for the database, American male, biped and carnivore, a blameless 5'8". Perhaps she'll bring me home in a canvas sack and stash my remains in a storage vault as if she's collecting antiques. I may be worth money someday. My skeleton, the backbone of some new dream. I doubt that, but imagine how pleased she'll be digging through the stream of consciousness rock until she arrives at 1916 Colfax, where she finds me, caught in the act of whispering sweet nothings through the fossil of a keyhole. Ooh. That one hits me right here. Would you like me to read that again?
No.
On better days, I bathe with Wallace Stevens, dreaming his good dreams before I fall asleep. Waves lapping, none of the poorly choreographed crashing they do around here, but waves that can read music. And one afternoon, when I felt a new dream studying me closely, I kept my eyes shut and lay flat. But the dream flew off, leaving me alone again, asleep with reruns. People who don't understand what it means to be an artist should be punished. And I know how. Make them be one. Make them write about their own mortal souls in the third person. Make them enroll at college, where they'll be forced to write creative things about a piece of driftwood, forced to write poems about their moods using colors like cerulean, another word for blue. People don't understand real artists, bottles with messages washed up on the beach, always a heartbeat ahead of the sea. It isn't always a matter of being in the right place at the right time, wearing clothes that make them notice you, black satin jackets and green string ties, crocodile shoes. Sometimes it's a matter of being in the wrong place at the wrong time, unsinkable as ivory soap, an aesthetic theory that isn't much more than a plain bad attitude. All I ever wanted was a nice cold beer in a booth with a view of the local scene, that, and the adulation of multitudes. There's a little place about a block from here where they never heard of free verse. When they say they took a bath, they don't mean they spent an hour soaking with esthétique du mal. They mean they lost big bucks at the track. For all they care, esthétique du mal could be bath salts. They know two things. On planet Earth, being yourself doesn't mean much, and there's no paycheck in pretending to be somebody else. So when I tell the waitress, oh yeah, I could have been another Wallace Stevens, she tells me, oh yeah, so who needs two? That's the kind of stuff that goes on in the poetry business. And I am so pleased when I can refrain from expressing myself, refrain from saying anything new. I like saying the same old thing, words that stay put. Words that don't go far, letting life remain a mystery for you. Words I might say to a small group of friends someday, friends who will sponge me down whenever I begin raving about free verse back in the 20th century, quoting at length from my own modest book of poems, a visionary work which sold poorly.
For 3 long years, I ran group therapy. For 3 long hours times 3 sessions per long week and no holidays, 12 long months of each long year, long evening after evening, and it made me kind of crazy. I had no therapeutic degree, but could say, I hear what you're saying without blinking when someone touched his nose to my nose and said soulfully, I can hear the bacteria in my yogurt singing. What a therapist needs to succeed in group therapy: a love for aluminum folding chairs and sad stories, an aptitude for nodding your head, and a strong desire to scratch your stomach thoughtfully while someone sitting beside you opens a wound the size of a gymnasium. As I listened, I repeated this phrase silently, automatically, inwardly, calmly. I am immune to the horrors of my own life. Oh, Father of psychoanalysis, forgive me. I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't understand the instruction book. At crucial moments, I would earn my paycheck by leaning forward and saying, look within yourself. Or, I know where you're coming from. Or, tell me how that makes you feel. After a few years, when I realized that no one was listening, I began to improvise with harmless asides like, keep your head down and swing through the ball. Or, red sky at morning, sailors take warning. Or, bake at 350 and cool before serving. It occurred to me that I had lost my mind. But I told myself no, that I had merely mentally retired. I studied the patients as they spoke, as the room became an aerodrome for ghosts, and tried to hear what they were saying, but they seemed to forget stories even as they told them. Their silence seemed a kind of praise for those who had survived what they had spoken. They seemed to be waiting for something, a moment of truth, a moment of grace, a moment of healing. No, they seemed to be waiting for the end of group therapy. And when they stood and collapsed and put them away, I heard what they hadn't been saying: the clatter of aluminum folding chairs, the clatter of those poorly drawn birds that fly so often through children's stories, mechanical but rising, awkward but without lamentation, happy.
I helped them escape my royal, pumping the black keys. My father, who wants to see the manager, who wants his say, how would you like it, 40 years cooped up in a boy's right brain? My mother, who isn't afraid of poetry, who is afraid I won't say much and so won't get paid. This poem you wrote, which end goes up? And the poem hurries across the page, wanting much more than them in it, layers of meaning and shadows galore. But my mother pours my father a cup of tea, and nothing unexpected happens. A breeze blows through, the creak of a screen door, and my big cathedral royal rattles on, letting half of me that feels crazy speak for half that feels alone. Everyone knows a poem that can't beat death isn't art. But 1,000 I ams and a dash of euphony cannot express much more than my mother and my father hiding smiles in cups of tea, bitterness eclipsed by twists of lemon, kitchen chairs in lemon sun. How this poem loves them, says so plainly. And where they live, all shadows should be ashamed, all clouds and all things difficult to name.
From a balcony at the Art Center, I can see everything, including a poor soul whose life is his art, a dangerous type, trampler of flowers and searcher for gold from sunken armadas, mourner, sunset shelter, apocalyptic pamphleteer. He sells pencils for 10 cents, all day tapping his white cane as if he's afraid to fall from the edge of the earth, and then at 5 o'clock, he removes his black goggles and sassays home, enjoying the view, a fraud. I watch him from the balcony, sip my demi-tasse, and play with the remains of my croissant, the crusty part I never eat. Time passes slowly in the upper atmosphere. All day clouds blow around, making faces at me, hello and goodbye without sound. And down below, reality has run amok. The blind man can see, as if a wire figure by Giacometti has suddenly come to life, as if an illusion can only go so far and then turns back, things being the way things really are.
I remember sitting on a gray wicker chair while someone pretty whittled my likeness from a russet potato. I remember toying with her hair and later her hands calling Brahms from the piano. I remember wondering how we remember who we are and who we are not each morning when we awaken, startled from bed by the alarm as if pelted with shot. I remember remembering this in December, cold where I was hidden with my secret thoughts near one street named for a tree and one street named for a river. I was waiting for someone who came so late that what I meant to say was lost until I saw her in my thoughts 30 years later at a bus terminal. She's still pretty, I wrote in my journal. I remember writing that sentence again and again like practicing scales on a childhood piano, and can't remember why I let the sentence end, can't remember what she saw in me beyond my eyes, the eyes of a russet potato. I remember saving grasshoppers in jars for her, remember my funhouse face in the mirror of the bowl of a spoon she hung from her nose to be dear. How lilac fumes made night a funeral parlor. I remember wondering what God would do if he missed her, sitting alone with her terrible stars, his terrible stars. And that must be why I have written this for her, as if she cares to remember my remembering, pianos and potatoes, spoons and mirrors, lilacs and toy hair.
Hello. I hope you're enjoying our little video. How does a poet spend his time? What does he do? Well, I do a lot of wandering aimlessly around the streets.
On one long road from here, I spent the time with some of those you have heard of who gave up our town. They introduced me to much more of the sky I had missed, and to the only cow of the farm. By some enchanted circumstance, I was meant to make friends. So I asked the big white nose as much as I knew about the business of milk. The cow stood. Things were not going good. So then I will tell this mammal about myself and the milk I give, which is in my enthusiasm and business of human poetry. Not a lick. So what, I thought? I shall instruct this cow in the ways of the beautiful green hour a shadow can become in the James Wright poem of the farm where he lay in an island of pine. Of interest, maybe, the ravine and brethren of said cow wandering through the poem, vanishing into the late afternoon. It was so human, I said. It fit this world. And taking a serious look into eyes of a cow, I know now that every mortal word you can say becomes confession. What I learned on the farm. The eyes are deep blue, so you remember heaven. The cow is big and brown, so you remember how cow listens when there's nothing else to do. Chews cud, shares a long and elegiac moo.
I got down on my knees with the little weeds and whispered to them. I counseled flowers, hey you, stand up straight. I hypnotized a crepe snake. That's what I did for so many dollars an hour, building a common garden of construction paper, finger paint, and scotch tape in the rec room of the adolescent long-term treatment program. That garden was a cost-effective therapy, And the dance we held that evening was a learning lab, therapy disguised as fun. The kids made funny costumes from bed sheets and danced beneath stars of aluminum foil. They played crazy music on the radio and danced like crazy. Rock, funk, soul, anything can be therapy. And with lights low, if that is allowed, any shadowy dance can be a beautiful scene from a Hollywood movie. I poured sugarless punch into styrofoam cups, kept count of the dangerous plastic forks, and monitored touch. I stood back far enough to translate body language, close enough to re-feel pain that might be used to document a diagnosis. They were dancing like kids, dancing like rabbits behind wire mesh in the seclusion of a city garden, psychotic, arsonist, suicide. Later they'd suffer the names life gave them. We tried everything. And sometimes it was painful to watch them dance with the skill they had to make dancing painful. And when the dancing was done, I uprooted the whole garden, fashioned bouquets for the trash barrel with fervor, like someone who needs psychiatric help, then dimmed the lights and sat in rec room darkness, letting darkness fill me as an owl fills with wisdom, a china owl in a city garden, waiting for something human to happen and make sense. The patient approach.
First I undress. Rising steam devours my physical being. A peppermint fragrance from time-release capsules of isopropyl sesquicarbonate, pentasodium triphosphate, blue number 7 and yellow number 3. Perhaps I'm not the young Greek god I was, but I admire my body anyway, letting my mind run wild with images suggested by the tub's iron acanthus leaves and African lion claws. Following my wet footprints across the hall, you can find me drying with a cotton towel, dousing with talc, strutting the future ruins of my apartment, a misbegotten ancestor, a la the amoeba. The human at his Saturday bath. Imagine your afterlife captioned like that. Nights he'd soak in noxious chemical powders. Later, walking around half naked was his habit, swaggering, swaying his hips, imitating animals he had put to death, until he felt beautiful, i.e., could be mistaken for wolf, puma, bull, elk. This ritual continued every Saturday, a Saturday the human calendar repeated endlessly without cost. From his language come the archaic curses, Tin Lizzie, bear market, endangered species. Of course, he is one of the lost.
Am I poor? Are the leaves falling because I can't afford them? Am I crazy? I think the leaves are falling because I can't afford them. Am I alone? Autumn leaves are falling like little lessons, but I haven't learned anything. The wind is cold, and the leaves have fallen for 3 days. For 3 days, the leaves illustrate how your hair falls. Wouldn't you call these terrible weather conditions? Loud sky, red rain, white crow, moon flying away. How can I love you in autumn when everything goes wrong? Last night, I burned 300 calories dreaming about your hair. I thought I felt animal earth lurch forward and fell into the dark ages between now and now. Sometimes, I want you to believe that I am an ancient poet who can say grand things. Last night, I couldn't sleep because the leaves were having an excellent discussion full of sad knowledge. But really, this is sweet confusion, mistaking leaves for something more. And all I can think to say is, do you like leaves falling? I would like to see you today. That's all. Someday, what will I be when I am nothing but a flutter behind your breastbone, like a leaf falling? Will you be the sky? Wouldn't you call these terrible weather conditions? There's a hole in the bottom of my old brown shoe, a hole in the sleeve of my old gray coat, a hole in the pocket of my old blue shirt where the wind blows autumn in and chills me. Wouldn't you call these terrible weather conditions? Something should be done about this. Someone should write to someone, as I am writing to you.
What can I write? It was a dark and stormy night, and I was howling in the sky-high streets. Juanita, where are you? My love will never die, or will die in 5 minutes without you. We must work fast. Oh, my. Once upon a time, my life was easier between lines where the mind stays blank, nothing to confess but this. Everything I know seldom fills a whole page. Someday I'll be dead. That was my idea. Someday I'll be dead, Juanita. That was my poem. And someday my critics will know this simple-mindedness and all this aloneness was my fame. How I show off my weaknesses. A few cents worth of dust and lost ingredients who wants to make a good impression, like a leaf in stone. So what if I stole my emotions, shyness from the Murphy bed, ardor from the gooseneck lamp, joy from the wooden chair? At least I let my poems stay put until the last potluck. Little sandwiches, Satan autographs with cheese whiz. And someday, Juanita, my fame will just be how useless I am. Beyond wanting and change, baby, ain't no poems tonight, just wind and rain.
Hello. Would you like to get to know me better? There's something I'd like to share with you. This is my writer's journal. A writer's journal is a place where he records his dreams and hallucinations, his feelings and his thoughts, because no one really wants to hear about them, so he puts them in his book. I'd like to share some of my journal with you. Sometimes life doesn't want to be a dream, as when an amber necklace worn by the moon becomes, at dawn, just mercury vapor lamps. At dawn, the moon stalls in my window as if waiting for encouragement. I can understand the moon. The moon wants to influence world events, but keeps attracting seawater and local folks who claim to be the lost czar. Bodies are piling up, I tell the moon. Something should be done about this. Someone should write to someone, as I am writing to you. Would you like to hear that one again? No.
There's a chance of rain on Minnehaha Avenue. That's how a poem should start. But they won't pay for little poems about the rain. They want art.